Hi kids, welcome back. I'm Michael. Today we're going to be talking about consumerism, globalization, and black labor. There's so many more things to know so we can make better political and social decisions. So let's get started. Kids, I love dressing up, but I hate the labor exploitation of the people who make our clothes. Transnational corporations like Nike and Adidas exploit laborers and consumers in two main ways: on the production side and on the consumption side, internationally and at home. The process of making our stuff can be unsustainable for our global environment and unhealthy for the people working in those conditions. Thankfully, we have organizations like the Clean Clothes Campaign and writers like Hoda Katabi and Naomi Klein shedding light on these important issues. Internationally, garment workers face poor working conditions in heavily guarded labor communities, poor pay and long hours, and workers are treated as expendable. One woman said, "It hurts us to be paid so little. I have to do this and they sell one piece of clothing for more than I get paid in a month. We cannot eat nutritious food. We do not have a good life. We live in pain for the rest of our life and die in pain." Some of the people making our products are not even voluntary workers. Many people are trapped in concentration camps and being forced to make these products. This applies to ethnic groups like the Uyghurs and other targeted religious and ethnic communities in places like China, much like prison labor in the United States. And I really don't like Nike because they were the pioneers of this idea of the brand as an idea or a mood formula. This way, marketing becomes less about the physical product or being contractually responsible for paying the labor that makes these products. And all of that is happily ignored to focus on advertising and to enhance the aesthetic of the brand that's being sold. Whether it's athleisure or collegiate chic or urban. We don't just buy sneakers, kids. We buy the dream of the swoosh and the idea of just do it. We don't just buy smartphones and laptops. We buy Apple. We buy a lifestyle. So that's production abroad. So how do we get people to buy and consume things here at home? Branding, marketing, and hyper-targeted advertising. These things intensify consumerism and cultural appropriation. Professor Robin Kelly tells us Nike, Reebok, LA Gear, and other athletic shoe conglomerates have profited enormously from post-industrial decline. TV commercials and print ads romanticize the crumbling urban spaces in which African American youth must play, and in doing so, they have created a vast market for overpriced sneakers. Ad agencies use Black language, Black environments, and Black influencers to sell their products without actually caring about the lived experiences and material conditions of Black life. And even going as far as supporting the people that make Black life worse. Today, instead of Spike Lee commercials, we have Black influencers and content creators who do the work of advertising agencies. Our culture and daily life is clogged with constant advertising. Ads are always political, kids, because they sell us what we want as a society. And in a racist, sexist, and classist society, you get racist, sexist, and classist ads, even if they're very subtle. We even advertise ourselves. Artists say things like, "I'm sponsored by," or "We thank our sponsors." The goal is for these corporations to make us feel like we need them and their products. This supports conspicuous consumption. Rapper Lupe Fiasco tells us that conspicuous consumption, that means it serves no other function than to show off to someone. When we don't have those things, consumer culture makes us feel isolated, while also making it seem as though everybody has these things and everybody can afford these things, despite systemic economic oppression. Despite one stimulus check in 7 months, people feel ashamed when their child doesn't have the shoes other kids have on the first day of school or at Christmas. Children are bullied because of brands and labels and what's considered a knockoff versus what's considered real. I had all the knockoffs, kids. People who are poor or low income can take that shame and blame themselves as opposed to blaming the systems, which prompts people to buy to prove themselves, or even steal. And mostly it's stealing basic necessities for survival, not even stealing the flex. As legendary MC Yasin Bey, formerly known as Mos Def, says, "There's hunger in the street that's hard to defeat. Many steal for sport, but more steal to eat." Meanwhile, corporations are profiting on our shame here and exploited human labor far away. So how does neoliberal globalization and labor exploitation overlap with black people, kids? When corporations replace domestic labor with outsourced labor abroad to cut costs, there's an economic impact on the people and communities that used to work for these corporations. This is called deindustrialization, kids. Which brings us to today's story, kids. Flint, Michigan. In 1960, black people in Flint, Michigan worked at a company called General Motors, and they had amazing worker benefits that they got from years of prior union organizing. In the 1970s, manufacturing companies like General Motors and Ford decided to cut costs by setting up factories in places like Mexico, South Africa, and Brazil, aka cheap labor, aka exploited labor. And get this part, kids, because this is where the story might get a little interesting for you and also a little familiar. So in order to keep companies like General Motors in Flint, Michigan, a desperate government agreed to give the company tax cuts and to not punish them for doing things like, say, polluting the Flint River water supply. From 1979 to 2010, Flint lost 85% of their manufacturing jobs that were held by black people. This is how capitalism and anti-blackness work together, kids. So we have to ask ourselves, kids, how much are we willing to accept? Do we want transnational corporations to sponsor our lives and our creativity? Do we want a society with no social safety net or labor protections? When greed makes these transnational corporations abandon the people that are relying on them. What's really dope though, kids, is that we can use this knowledge to push for policy and local and national and international labor protection. We can get to know the history of our black labor in our cities and in our counties, or join our local labor union, not police unions. We can think deeper about global supply chain management and our own relationship to consumption, exploitation, and cultural appropriation. We can better analyze advertisements from corporations and ad influencers and ads that don't really look like ads. Now, kids, this isn't about feeling guilty about the number of shoes that we have in our closets. This is about asking ourselves, why did we want them in the first place? Beyond their practical meaning, of course. And how did they get to us? One of the most ironic features of our time are people marching for the protection of black lives against brutality while wearing shoes that are made from gender-based violence of women of color across the world. Remember, we're more than consumers. We're humans. Be humane. Black Lives Matter.